I get a phone call probably 9 months after class and say, I need some help. I said, okay. He said, I sat in your class. You went through all of this. And I literally thought that will never happen to me. And I found out my bookkeeper has been embezzling. It was north of $100,000 by the time I get done. And he goes, I'm so embarrassed, but I didn't pay attention to what you said because I had a bookkeeper I could trust.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Build, the podcast where innovation meets collaboration in the world of construction. We bring together thought leaders and industry experts to explore the cutting-edge ideas transforming construction equipment, supply chains, building materials, and workforce productivity.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Faro, the revolutionary last-mile logistics platform, redefining how high-value, time-sensitive construction deliveries get done. Need it fast? Need it right? Faro.
Today, we are joined by Ruth King, a renowned profit and wealth guru with over 40 years of experience in helping business owners, financial professionals, and entrepreneurs increase profitability, build wealth, and achieve their goals. As the founder and CEO of Financially Fit Business, Ruth has developed cutting-edge AI-driven tools that empower businesses to analyze their financial health in less than 10 minutes a month, making it easier for them to spot trends, reduce costs, and improve overall performance. Ruth is also an acclaimed author with best-selling books like The Courage to be Profitable and The Ugly Truth About Cash, which have both helped countless small business owners make smarter financial decisions. She's a trusted consultant and coach, known for solving complex business problems and delivering practical strategies for sustained growth and success. Today, we'll dive into Ruth's insights on how businesses in construction logistics and third-party hauling can improve operational productivity, maximize profits, and foster a culture of high performance within their teams. Ruth, welcome to Beyond the Build.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, Ruth, Scott and I both agree that our conversation is likely going to revolve a little bit around financials and kind of business health and those types of things. So why don't we kind of kick things off with, give us a little bit more of an overview, an umbrella of what describes you when it comes to that area of your expertise.
All right. So my thing is to help business owners by giving them the tools and process to get and stay profitable, build wealth, and significantly impact their lives and the lives of their employees. Unless you're a CPA or bookkeeper, you didn't start your business to do the financial side of business, and it's the last thing you think about. However, the really smart ones actually pay attention from day one. They're very few and far between, but there are some out there. Most people don't start paying attention to it until they can't pay a bill, the major customer leaves, or there's some financial crisis that forces them to look at pricing, to look at a P&L, to look at a balance sheet, and take QuickBooks for what it's supposed to be, or any of the other accounting software, and actually make it and do it right, rather than garbage in equals garbage out, which happens generally after a couple of years in business when something usually goes wrong.
Do you have any specific customers currently or in the past that have kind of touched our industry, whether it be like logistics, transportation, direct construction, contractors, engineers, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, the interesting part about it is because when I really started thinking about some of the things that we can talk about, I want to talk about billable hours. And that goes across no matter what, because even in logistics and even in, deliveries and everything else like that, every single thing is really dependent on a person, pretty much, a truck or something like that. And the ability for that truck and that person to be, number one, productive, very good at, a route. So you have some sort of dispatcher who better know what he or she is doing, to be able to make them as profitable and productive as you possibly can. So one of the ratios that I use all the time is called a productivity ratio. And what that says is for every dollar that you bring in the door, how much you're spending on payroll and payroll taxes. So if your ratio is 60%, that means 60 cents out of every dollar is going to pay payroll and payroll taxes. For logistics, it better not be. It better not be that high. It probably should be somewhere around 30 to 40% with everything else, because you have the truck expenses and you have overhead expenses and you have marketing expenses and all the other fun things that we get to have, rent, utilities, when I'm leaving stuff out. So one of the ratios that, people who are listening to this really should start thinking about is, okay, for every dollar that we bring in the door, how much are we spending on payroll and payroll taxes? And seeing what that number actually is. And the lower the number, the better. It's a very, the ratio is not such that, higher means better. Lower means better with this ratio, which is counterintuitive to most people, because most people think, okay, the higher it is, the better it is. Well, no, because if it's at 60% and it goes to 80%, that means 80 cents of every dollar is going to pay payroll and payroll taxes. And I don't think that's where you want to be. You want it to be 30%, maybe 40%. And those are some numbers that they can track very, very easily. How much did you pay for payroll? You get that at the end of the month, no matter which software that you're using or which payroll service that you're using. You divide by revenue. It's an easy number. It's not hard to do, but it tells you so much about what's going on in your business.
It does. And I think a lot of, young business owners or new business owners, they fail to see some of those hidden costs, which you and I know that are not hidden, where they're just not being looked at. We're like, let's say you're going through a negotiation for a new employee on a salary. Well, how much are they making? And maybe a hiring manager is like, if I'm going to bring him in at 50,000 or 60,000, that's the number they plug in. And you have to say, well, wait a second. You've got benefits, you've got payroll taxes, you've got all this other stuff. So when you start looking at it and, let's just use some easy numbers and ratios, you're like, well, if 50% of your expense is on benefits and or payroll taxes, that $50,000 employee is $100,000 to the business. And have you accounted for that in your P&L to make sure that you have enough revenue to support it, not just support what they sign for their salary?
Yeah. I mean, if we think about it, by the time you figure in their truck, their benefits, you're right, it's about 50%. And it's a lot of money. So the question really is, if somebody wants 50, we have to assume it's 100 or close to it. And then say, okay, how much revenue do we have to bring in to cover this person's salary and benefits? And the answer to that is you take that number and divide it by the gross margin of your company, and that's the break even. So if it's 100,000, the gross margin is 40%. We have to look at $250,000 in revenue that this truck and person have to produce in order just to break even on this person. Never mind make a profit. People think about that.
I know we're still talking to just about the payroll side and the benefits. Then all of a sudden you have to think, well, I have to disclose more employees to my insurance company, and now I have more people. Like don't even get me started on where that industry is going.
Oh my gosh.
Because I
No,
look at
let's not
stuff and
go
I'm
there.
just like,
Okay.
I'm not sure if I even want to go that way. And in trucking and logistics, when we started this model, the Uber crowdsource. So thankfully, a lot of our partners are 1099 contractors, and we don't have that additional burden expense. But we really had to look at the logistics models that are offered today, right? Typical of transportation, if you're doing LTL or interstate, they typically either bid it out per distance, or what they'll do is they'll say it's so much per mile. And so when I looked at so much per mile, we had an instance where we had to move a couple trucks from like Texas to Arizona, and JP and I were looking at different brokers and rates. Well, the one we landed on had a dollar per hour rate. And so we said, okay, as the shipper, this is what I know I'm going to pay to move this asset. Well, then I started thinking, like, what if that driver got stuck on the 10 freeway for 7 hours because of a closure? Like, me as a shipper, I'm like, no, you quoted me this rate. Traffic is traffic. It's part of the industry. But what does that do to your overall profit margin on that load? when you're just stuck in things that you can't control, but yet you bid out so much per mile, right? So you look at that model and you go, wow, I've got to get, really lucky, or I've got to pad myself to know exactly what my expenses are for my vehicle and all the overhead, so that even though if I quoted $1.86 a mile, I know my hard costs on that is 95 cents. So you're like, I have some margin in there, wiggle in case it takes 4 hours longer or there's an issue. So in transportation, we said, okay, that's in a model. And then what we do is we do last mile. So, you know, we want to look at stuff under 200 miles, right? The products that get shipped to the ports, then the trucking or the trains move it to a distribution center. And we've all had that in the consumer where, where's my stuff? And, oh, well, it's been sitting at the warehouse for 7 days and we're waiting for a truck to get it the last 36 miles, right? That was the space we said, hey, let's help there. But then even in that space, it came down to per hour cost, right? So you have maybe large tractor trailers in the equipment industry. You can run ranges anywhere from $150 to $200, 2-hour minimums, portal to portal. Some people say, I'll charge a mileage fee. And then, one of the things that we did is we did both minutes and miles. But you start looking at all three of those models, and then really, how does that steer back to your P&L and say, is this a profitable model when you factor all your costs? You
Well,
think people
not
are
only
looking
that,
at
one of the things is we do a thing called unproductive or unbillable time. So if you're sitting in Atlanta on 285 on a Friday afternoon and it takes you 2 hours to get someplace that it normally should take you a half an hour, that is unbillable time. And so you accumulate that over a period of time, a month, 2 months, 3 months, quarter, whatever. And we have a unbillable time percentage. So we add that to all of the costs. So for example, if it's supposed to take an hour and let's not do an hour. Let's suppose it's supposed to take 10 hours because then we can do that one. And we know that we have on average 2 hours of unbillable time, whatever percentage that is, 20% unbillable time. We take 100 and divide by 0.8 to get the amount that you're going to basically charge. So you have to include unproductive or unbillable time.
One question I had with regards to like the complexities of, the financial side, albeit like it's one of the kind of funny things is that you said earlier on that it's like, like there's like no such thing as an unknown cost. Like this is how I took it, at least. It's like there's no such thing as an unknown cost. It's just unwatched. Like we just don't see it, or we're not. Sometimes we're probably scared to pay attention to it because we're scared of what we're going to dig up in this, this financial graveyard. But my big question is, do the problems stay the same when you're a small company just starting out like a startup as you scale into, a larger business? Do the problems stay the same? Does it get easier as you scale up, or is it more difficult and it's just different problems?
I'm going to answer that question in two pieces. All right. So the problems that you have, which are revenue generating problems, i.e. people getting stuck, trucks breaking down, that kind of stuff, doesn't change whether you're a single person or, 20, 40, 50, 100 person organization. That doesn't change because you're still going to have that no matter what, whether you're by yourself or whether there's 100 people in your organization. Now, what does change is overhead. So the larger the organization is, the more people you're going to have. You're going to have somebody dispatching, somebody really selling. You're going to have people doing X, Y, Z, A, B, and C. But the interesting part about that is that the overhead piece, even though it's larger, gets divided over many, many more people. So the actual overhead per person is much smaller in a large organization than it is if you're by yourself. If you're by yourself, you got to cover everything. Now, granted, the number is much, much smaller, but you have to cover everything. So, for example, let's assume you're by yourself and the overhead for your company is $100,000. So I can do these numbers kind of in my head. All right. So you say, okay, I want to add another person, and that person overhead doesn't double. Let's say the overhead goes to $10,000 more, because it's not going to double. So we now have $110,000 of overhead divided by 2 people, which is $55,000 of overhead a person. We add a third person, we go to 120, and that 55 drops to 40. So you can see as you get more and more people, the overhead number itself in aggregate gets larger, but the overhead per person who's generating revenue gets lower. That's the big change between small companies and large companies.
Yeah, either way, you got to look at the bottom. I used to in the past organizations that I worked with, we had different terminologies. You know this, Ruth. It's like we had the SOO, we had the CIS, we had all of our different acronyms we use, and you could get super lost in the middle. And when I came in, I went to school for English and journalism. Like math, I was like, how do I get through this course and just pass with my C and get my stamp of approval? But what's really funny is when I would go into my management operating reviews quarterly, I could go toe to toe with the controller is because I studied the numbers. I didn't know how they calculated, but what I did is I looked at the numbers and I looked at percentages and I looked at them as levers. And I was going, okay, what's going on with my overtime? What's going on with my outside hauling? How do I look at my depreciation costs differently for my assets? And it wasn't just so much like, okay, let's study the numbers, but it was like, let's be aware of the lagging indicators and then go out in the field, talk to employees and figure out how do we move this lever to make it shift? And I remember one time, like you guys remember that movie Rain Man when the toothpicks fall off of the counter and he's like 786. And how did you know that? There's something weird about my brain where I could look at an SOO or P&L and within 30 seconds, I would just be like, well, there's your problem right there. I could point at it. And they're like, how did you find that? I'm like, I don't know. It's my Rain Man ability. It like zeroed in on the lever. And so what we started to do is looking at the profit center managers who are there to manage people, but us to understand their financials is going, stop trying to analyze every single GL code. Just look at the areas that drive most of your cost and see how you improve those levers to get more efficient. Because like you said, JP, it was like a financial graveyard. And Ruth, you could probably attest to this. You could get down rabbit holes where I've had controllers going, why did your sales rep buy only one bag of ice at the 7-Eleven? Then I'm like, really? That's your question? It's like I got bigger things over here, and you're questioning a $3.86 charge. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you only had 2 cups for the ice. What's your question?
Well, the good thing is that it cost him more to find that $3 and whatever else it is
Right.
than the $3 and whatever it is was worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I think it
crazy.
boosted his ego, right? Like I know everything. I think it more was as a power shift, but
Yeah,
you
I
can
mean, the
get
things that
lost in all the numbers.
the profit center managers should be bonus based on the profitability of that particular profit center. And if they are, they will pay attention and take care of it.
Which is funny because I'm really curious about your opinion on this matter. So what we do is we're offering third-party hauling to enterprise business to businesses that have their own internal trucking resources. They have a process, they have a system. They measure the cost per truck and say, I know to turn wheels on this asset, it's going to cost me $236, right? To basically just start it up and drive it across the yard. And then they appropriately try to sell their services or ancillary charges for delivery and pickup to whatever they can get their end users to pay. And with their national, local customers, they have different rate structures. So in the past, third-party hauling is looked at as bad. Oh, we shouldn't do that. We have to lower that metric on our P&L. It's additional cost to the business. Don't do it at all cost. Try to avoid. But then we would come in and say, well, wait a second. Your delivery recovery is like 70%. So those, you're losing every time you make a delivery. But for some reason, you can tell your customers that, oh, I have to third-party haul this. Then they pay more. It's like, why wouldn't businesses start to look at their internal costs and say, we don't need to hire more people. We don't need to get more trucks. We need to get different in how we look at the business and not look at this line item on the P&L as negative, but saying, wait a second, we increased our outside hauling by 20%, but we were more profitable and increased our delivery recovery to 102. This is a good expense, not a bad expense. Like, how do we train leaders to just look at their financials differently? Right? Like, I think stop looking at the middle and start looking at the bottom and seeing like what's happening when it pushes through.
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. How many people brag about their net profit? Nobody. They brag that they increased revenue by this, or they increased revenue by that. They never, ever look at their bottom line. I mean, I could care less that you increased your revenue. I cared that you increased your bottom line 20%.
That doesn't seem logical to me. So people don't. It's traditional in the industry for folks not to note their net profits.
No. What I'm saying is they don't boast about their
They
net
don't boast
profits.
about it. They
Right,
say, "Oh,
right.
we did
They
$10
boast
million
about-
last year."
Okay. It's all about revenue. Like we increase revenue, but it's not as much focus on the bottom line, which ultimately we say the bottom line for a reason. Like,
Yeah. Well, it was really funny because one of my clients had his CPA walk in the door, true story, and say, you did really, really well this year. You increased your revenues by whatever it was. And the guy looked at him and he said, did you look at my bottom line? Didn't change a dime from where it was last year.
it's red.
Well, no, it wasn't red,
No, it's not.
but it didn't go up at the same rate that the
Yeah,
revenue
not a
side.
not a commensurate rate.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where you should focus. And I don't care what business you're in. I mean, revenue is important, but what you keep is more important.
Are there any good stories that you have from, ideally customers that are in our space, something construction or construction adjacent logistics, but of, we keep calling it a financial graveyard. It feels like people might avoid a lot of these hard truths longer than they should. Is there any good story of where, someone finally let someone who knew what they're doing into the financial side, and then like some like groundbreaking discovery, either really positive or really negative, was discovered?
I'm going to give you a really negative one. And I just happened to think about it. So I teach a class called Building Profit and Wealth, where we spend a day on a P&L and a day on a balance sheet, understanding pricing, costs, overhead, all the costs related. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. So I had a guy sit in that class, and the last part of that class is about making sure that nobody embezzles from you. And here are the things that you've got to put in place. And he said, that will never happen to me. So I get a phone call probably 9 months after class and say, I need some help. I said, okay. He said, I sat in your class. You went through all of this. And I literally thought that will never happen to me. And I found out my bookkeeper has been embezzling. It was north of 100,000 by the time that got done. And he goes, I'm so embarrassed, but I didn't pay attention to what you said because I had a bookkeeper I could trust. She was friendly. She was happy. She learned our systems, da, 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 da. And I stopped looking at the P&Ls and the balance sheet in my checkbook.
They're those ZPs. They're I call them magicians. Oh no, look here, I got this taken care of. Yeah, we're good.
The unfortunate reality of human behavior, there's been studies on this very thing, is what makes a human deceive, what makes a human lie. And unfortunately, it's not as often as we'd like, just based on simple morality or how you were raised or whether you're, Christian or follow commandments or anything like that. What the studies found, unfortunately, is it's all about opportunity and if they how much they think they can get away with it. So if you have opportunity and, in your case, Ruth, no one's watching, that carrot on the string or whatever is very tempting the longer that situation occurs.
Yeah, the professional embezzler gets a kick in seeing how much they can actually get away with before they leave. No,
Professional
seriously,
embezzler?
they do.
I know. Yeah. And in construction, I think a lot of contractors struggle. And I mean, you've all probably remodeled a house or have somebody in there. Like, how many times have you reached out and the contractor, super talented, can build you a mosaic, right? The stuff that they put together, you're just like, wow, I don't even know how to start. but then you give them a checkbook and they're like, I don't even know. So it's like you get these companies that can do really good trade work, but their books are just a disaster. Or the other ones that have really good financials and they don't really know how to cut a 45 angle. It's more like a 46 or 7, and they just put caulking in there, right? So it's like you're sacrificing, what are you? Are you really good in your trade, or are you really good in managing and running a business?
You need to be
'Cause
both.
exactly, you know, and I mean, for example is like, had a landscaper. Guy was fantastic, right? Came in and he's like, I call him an arborist, but he couldn't get me a bill for like 4 months. And I'm like, hey, like, I don't know how you're covering your expenses, but if you want me to pay you, you got to send me. Oh, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. And I was probably like one of probably 50 clients he had. And I'm just like, oh no, there's
Yeah, he's running
somebody's.
he's running his business out of his checkbook, and one day there's gonna be no cash in his checkbook
Exactly.
because he didn't
Exactly.
bill.
Yep.
Ruth, I guess, what was was there any additional insight from this story that you said, or is there another story, another example where
Do
what
you
I
wanna
would
know how
love to
she did
hear?
it?
No,
Yeah. How'd you,
what I'm angling at is I want to hear about
maybe he's like, "Can you give me ideas?" No, just kidding.
an opportunity that was like found or discovered. It could be like negative. It's like, oh, you have this giant hole that we can fix, and now that we fixed it, it's going to be great. Or you go in and you find the opposite. It's like, oh, you have all of this extra stuff. That probably never happens. So you have all this extra money. That doesn't happen. So I guess it's always going to be the reverse. So is there another example where it's like, ooh, we discovered something that's such a great opportunity that you would never have known had you not had someone, or had you not started, watching this and start looking at it?
A lot of times when you're not making money, the thing is, okay, we gotta raise our prices. All right. And that will solve the issue. But in a lot of cases, and I can name names, but I'm not naming names. What we found, and the whole is that we are paying, for 40 hours or however many hours it is, but we're actually only being able to be productive for 20. So you have 20 hours of unproductive time every single week. And as soon as you close that up, you start watching the bottom line go up and up and up and up and up. So that and I'm not gonna tell you specific stories, but there's a lot of those too. And it really is, it's not always raising prices. It may be fixing productivity. It may be fixing theft. I started working with a client, and I said, "I'll help you grow it, but we're gonna fix the hole going out the back door." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "There is probably $250,000." It turned out about $250,000 that people had evaporated with. And he told them at the end of the year, he told them what happened, and we tightened it up and got inventory really well. This doesn't apply to your industry because it really and truly is not this issue. Um, but we ended up within 1% of what the balance sheet said on inventory by the time we were done, and they had true profitability. That doesn't happen where you are for all intents and purposes. That's not what is significant for logistics. Logistics more is bad English. Logistics really and truly is, all right, if we're gonna do this by, X number of dollars, fine. How much are we making per hour? Or if we're doing this on an hourly basis, or we're hiring, third party people to do this, that fixes your labor costs. That's probably the best way to do it, simply because your labor cost is totally fixed. And people don't think about that. Businesses don't think about that. But it's a lot, the Uberization, as you said originally, or when we started talking about this, is probably the best way to go. Look what Uber does. They own a single car? No.
Yeah, they're not even a true like broker. They're called what a TNC, a transportation network company. So they're not even regulated by FMCSA, like federal. Like it's all state regulated. But yeah, you go back to the labor side of it, in logistics and trucking and construction. I got a couple different uh examples. So one of the organizations I worked at for a long time, we went through a full overhaul on how to be more productive in operations. We did the Kaizen and the 5S and the Lean and all the Six Sigma stuff that people have been studying for many decades. And one of the things we looked at is we looked at our turn times on our trucks in yard. So old process is you'd have a semi truck come in and the driver would pull in, engage the PTO, and then the driver would have to walk the yard and find the piece of equipment that needed to go on next and drive it over themselves, chain and bind it down, and then head out. And sometimes it would be multiple pieces on a rig. So our average turn time from when the driver's wheels hit the yard before they left was running about 47 to 50 minutes. They were sitting in yard. And that driver could execute maybe 10 different events a day. Well, what we did is we took the yard personnel and we made them like a NASCAR pit crew in communication. So that driver knew to call 15 minutes before they were arriving in the yard, and those yard personnel would have their equipment that's going out staged first on, last off in a line. And as soon as that driver came in and parked, we had 3 people unchaining and binding like a NASCAR pit crew, pulling stuff up, pushing stuff on, and we took that 47-minute turn time to 17 minutes. And we had 22 drivers running at that time, and we were able to increase our actual loads per day by almost like 20% because we weren't spending all that time in the yard doing that. And that was a process that we had to look at and say, how do we get better? Because we still had to service our customer base. But if we didn't do it that way, the drivers didn't go home anytime sooner. Our overtime was climbing, right? We were running 16, 20% in some months of overtime on drivers. So they're burned out. Then their pay goes up. We still have to service the customer. And all we needed to do was get more runs done during the business hours by adding not more people to the organization, but a different process in which we operated in.
Yeah. Think out of the box.
Exactly. And that stemmed from looking at the financials, and I'm going, okay, what are my biggest drivers here? And they're like a rental card. It's my depreciation, my labor, right? Those are some of the biggest things that I can somewhat control, right? I can distribute fleet out to another location if you're a shared resource, or I can lower some of the wages by the overtime. Those are the things, those are levers that I'm saying, okay, we got to figure this out because we're hemorrhaging. Bottom line is not where it needs to be. And construction is the same thing, right? It's all about labor wrench time, productivity. And there's been studies out there that the average construction project is about 30 to 35% wrench time, meaning actually doing work. Are they lower or higher? Higher. So in these big, large, like let's say we're doing an NFL stadium, an oil refinery and stuff like that, the meetings and all the waiting and staging, it's like you're not productive to the point where we figure out like, where do we need to put the porta potties? How far away? Or like a project in New York when we're doing a 130-story high rise and we're watching the laborers walk down, go into Manhattan, get a sandwich, come back to the project, and look at the GC and be like, why don't we just get a Subway franchise to go on the 14th floor of the site and we move it up through the project and everybody doesn't have to like leave. They stay. That's the outside of the box kind of thinking where you're like, how do I increase labor productivity? And when you're dealing with projects, 500,000 man hours on a project, you get 10% better. We're talking millions of dollars worth of savings. Changing your process is going to help considerably. But also, Ruth, I was going to ask you, with let's say a company that's starting out, where's the risk? Is it leveraging their debt so much where they're buying assets and they can't pull back? Or do you think most of the risk comes with their process and how they're managing their labor pools and their, like, where do you think that
It's
risk
people.
is?
It's people managing the people. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you expand on that a little bit more?
okay, you can always get a truck. But if you get a guy who's unproductive, you get a guy who pisses off a customer, you get a guy who just, doesn't want to do it and doesn't care, that's going to cause a whole lot more problems. And hiring the right people and managing the processes for those people is absolutely critical. And that's the most important thing that they're going to do.
That's the difficult thing, is making sure that we talked about on other podcasts, you recruit, you retain, and you recognize, right? Those are the organizations I think that have the higher level of success, right?
Well,
You
you got
get
to
luck.
measure before you recognize. Recruit,
Correct.
retrain, measure, then recognize.
Right.
Or
That
go
is
through
true.
my career readjustment program,
Yep.
which is firing somebody, by
A
the way.
career readjustment program. Oh,
You
everybody
remember
Yeah,
just
that?
but
You
has
remember that movie, Up in the Air,
I never
yes.
saw that one.
with George Clooney? And yeah, so it's the concept of the movie is about a professional firer. Companies hire this person to go and fire people for them. It's a very novel movie idea. It's just funny the way you worded your program. And,
My career
kind of remind.
readjustment program.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny. I had a friend's wife the other. We were sitting at dinner, and she's a very positive individual. Doesn't really see anything. Tries not to sees the good in everything. And we were talking about an individual, and she's just like, everybody just has a different set of skills.
Yeah, but sometimes that set of skills should not be in your company because it's tearing it down rather than building it up.
Yeah, they came in and say, I have these skills, and then you watch them for 2 or 3 weeks. You're like, yeah, I'm not sure that you represented those skills appropriately.
My thing is hire slow, fire fast. Because what happens, everybody who this particular individual is working with already knows that this person is not good. You're generally the last person to do it. And you as the owner, especially in smaller companies, is afraid to do it because, okay, I lose this revenue stream or whatever else it is, but he's actually costing or she's costing you money. And everybody goes, what took you so long to fire that person? And they rally around and pick up the slack until you find a replacement.
Yeah, if you can identify and measure quickly, you can usually avoid, a financial catastrophe. I have some people in the industry that I've talked to, they've been in business for quite some time. The biggest challenge for them is like the loyalty factor of they had an employee that's been with the company for 10 years that is now operating in a different capacity, but was one of those stakeholders in the very beginning that helped them build the company. And now they're like, what do I do now? Like, it's not the same person, but you're like, that same person has compounded and made more money in higher positions. And now you have to weigh this whole, like, it's costing the business a lot of money. They aren't as productive. Even if they were to leave, it's like a addition by subtraction. But how do I weigh this 15-year loyalty, kind of thing? Those are the sticky ones.
Those are the sticky ones, but the people who got you there aren't the people to take you to the next level as a general rule. And hiring and firing your first employee, if it's 10 years later, it's really, 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 really hard. But the business has to survive as you get larger. And I can't, I'm sure you see this too, is that I would prefer to be in a truck rather than sitting here all day managing this business is really what happens a lot of times as it gets old, as it gets larger and larger and larger, because they can't be in a truck. They have to manage all the processes and procedures and all the KPIs and all the other fun things that go up, along with it. And it's not only the financial side, but it's the actual operation side. It's making sure the customers are happy, doing all the things with respect to customers, doing all the things with respect to the internal customers, i.e. the people who are producing the revenue. And then obviously is the financial side too, but it's tough, especially if you started driving a truck.
How
Hmm.
well do you think, from a financial perspective, the C-level stakeholders are measuring their time and their productivity? I guess there's the response.
Now they're running around trying to micromanage a lot of them because then it's not being done the way they used to do it.
And so one of the things that we try to identify smaller contractors, and I'll just take for like, let's say you're a custom home builder. We'll go in and ask and say, what do you spend most of your time doing? And they'll be like driving around to supply stores and dropping things off at sites that, the crews forgot to get or they need. And I'm like, so but who's selling your project? He's like, well, I do that when I'm not dropping off stuff. And you're like, okay. And you're just going, wait a second. How much is your hourly rate? And you're doing what?
Yeah. That's what I talk about a lot. It's like, all right, it's much cheaper to hire somebody to do that. It's much more productive too.
But our pride gets in the way, and I'll blame myself on some things. I'm like, no, I know how to do that. Let's say it's working on the car. My daughter's, Jeep. She's 16 and has a manual transmission Jeep, and she successfully drove it to where it didn't run and operate. And so car analogy, took the clutch, the flywheel, and the fork pin and just exploded it, right? So I'm like, well, that's a $4,000 expense to
When
a
did this
mechanic.
happen, Scott?
Oh, this happened like 2 weeks ago. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, if I could just find the time, I could do it in the garage. I got the tools, but I was like, yeah, but what is that going to do for my business? I don't have the time to do it. But I'm like, but I can do it. I know I can do it. And my wife's like, take it somewhere. Stop it.
Your wife's right.
Yeah. She's the
Don't say
brains of
that.
the
Don't say,
operation.
don't say that too loud, Ruth.
She knows she's the brains of the operation. She's
Yeah.
like, no, we're not doing this. Just move on, hire somebody and stop it.
Or
But
find
as
another
owners,
Jeep.
yeah, that's what we should have thought about. But it had 90,000 miles on it. I mean, it was about ready, but a 16-year-old who rides the clutch, but to the point, things happen, and it goes back to where business owners start empowering other people to help you get to where you need to go and stop holding it and
Yeah.
thinking you can do it all yourself.
Not if you want to grow the business. Now, if you want to work for wages your entire life, that's fine. Nobody's saying that you have to grow it. But if you're going to operate your business out of your checkbook, hopefully you never get hurt. Hopefully you never get in an accident. Hopefully, those things don't happen. And, you're basically trading working for somebody else to, being a slave to your business. That's not the idea.
With JP, I want to pivot back because for selfish reasons, Ruth, the question I asked about, let's say the outside hauling on the P&L being a negative, expense. Like, what would you tell a business owner when you're like, stop looking at expenses as a bad thing and start implementing processes and where you can generate more profitable revenue? Like, how do you have that conversation with somebody that thinks, oh, no, we're good. It's not broken. Why try to fix it?
Well, I generally don't come in if something's not broken. Rarely. All right. So my thing about is you can be complacent. And a lot of times salespeople get very complacent. They're comfortable making the commission that they're making and everything along those lines. And they don't want to go out and find new clients, find new customers. And the only answer to that is hire more salespeople, and they'll either compete or they'll don't.
Yeah, because I looked at situations where when I was sitting back in the chair studying my financials, all right, I will go back to the term like the delivery recovery. Like 70% is acceptable in the industry, but I'm like, we got to get to like 80, 90% delivery recovery. Like, how can we do that without shocking our customers and saying we're raising our delivery rates by, X percentage? Or looking at, saying, how do we get better? How do we get more efficient? Right? What would happen if we lowered our overtime percentage from 15 down to 7? Right? What would that look like from a profitability standpoint?
Yeah. How do we get them more productive so that you can keep your rates the same way that you are? I'm going to tell you the salt story. All right. So I travel all over the country, and I'm sitting on an airplane next to this woman one night, and she sells salt. All right. Which is probably the most commoditized thing you can potentially sell. And they sell it higher than everybody else. But what they guarantee is on-time delivery. So this goes right into what you guys do. And she says how we sell it is that, look, can you afford not to have salt in your plants? When you need salt to do this particular process and the truck is late, how much is that costing you actually? And they have 100% on-time guarantee delivery. And that's how she gets the higher price for the salt.
I'm glad you went that way, because when you first said salt, I thought table salt. I'm like thinking like just salt on your kitchen table.
No, like salt
But
for
not quite.
processing
yeah, like
plant, food
salt for plants,
processing plant.
manufacturing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right? Because you could lose a whole batch of a product because you don't have the right material, and then depending on what the cost of this, that's
Yeah,
that's
it's
detrimental.
more costly than a little bit higher in salt.
Right.
So my point there is look at the value of it. What are you doing that's different, better, more valuable to your client that could allow you to charge the extra little bit?
And also, in our industry, breakdowns, forgetting to order, ordering the wrong piece of equipment. Those are edge cases. Unfortunately, those happen too often where you're like, okay, that's just part of the chaos of construction. And to your point, like if you had a compressor on the job site to operate, air tools, and an O-ring blows or a seal or something like that, you need another air compressor, because each one of those individuals that's operating, maybe it's two guys, on a hose and, a piece of equipment, but four other guys are waiting for something to be broken. Every single one of those individuals has got their hands in their pocket waiting for a new compressor to show up. And an hour, 2 hours, the money is just flowing out. And your partners are like, we can get you one. We have one, but our next available driver is going to be about 4 hours, or I can bring a salesperson in and have them do it, but now they're not selling, or my manager can do it. And we're just like, I go back to the whole Richard Simmons, stop the insanity. Like, just hit the button. We have a solution. Like, help your customer get it there. Like, go. And they're like, nope, we have to use our process. And you're just like, okay, I can create opportunity, but getting you to take it, that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, believe it or not, we are already wrapping up on our time here. I had a final question for you regarding kind of, I guess, your advice. What do you think on two sides, on the personal front as an individual and on the business side, like for, either a leader of a company or a company in general? Is there a habit or mindset that you believe is a key to success that you would encourage others to adopt? I know that there's not one, but if you could pick one.
Look at your bank account online every day. Takes 2
Why?
minutes.
Why do that?
I don't want to be depressed.
No. Okay, you know who's paid you. You know something is wrong. You know what supposedly has gone out in terms of payments to people, checks that have come in and stuff like that. It is the best way to keep tabs of your business just in your own mindset by looking at it every day. And you also, if there's the bad guys out there who are trying to steal your money, they'll put like a 2-cent thing in there and a 27-cent thing in there, and immediately to call the bank and close your bank account.
Just make a habit of just opening up your account every day and just giving it a once over. It sounds like we'd be surprised at how effective that is at finding problems.
It's very effective. I promise you it's very effective. And everybody knows you're watching. So that's one thing with respect to helping to eliminate embezzlement. The other thing is get your financial statements every month and look at them. Takes 5 minutes. Dump them in the software.
Having a good CRM, something that you can manage.
Those would be the two things I would do, beginning and, back end, both.
Bonus question, 10 minutes a month, AI. What does that mean?
That means you can upload your financial statements into the software, click a button, and AI analyzes the statements and produces impactful graphs so that you can make sure the trends of your business are heading in the proper direction. And if they're not, do something about them before they turn into major crises.
That's assuming they're coded to the right account.
Well, that's assuming that their financials are clean.
That's like the sales reps we have. I'm like, nope, that's not where it goes. Nope. I spend more time basically reshuffling it to the right GL code than I do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, now we
Clean
got it.
financials.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, if they're not clean, I guess the AI could probably also tell you this is not
Oh,
clean.
AI will kick them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll boot it.
It does. If it's we've identified 12 major things that are wrong with financial statement, and it will kick it out. It reads it and it will kick it out.
Do you think AI can basically get us to a point where we don't need an accounts receivable staff?
No, you're always going to need somebody calling.
Sorry, Scott. Yeah.
JP's like the scars on my back right now from the AR collection is
Yeah.
full sleep.
Yeah, I mean, that's unless you're going to have an avatar of you making the phone calls and going, yeah.
Yeah. Pay me.
But somebody has to do it.
Yeah, that's one of
Sorry.
the challenges we're in. We feel like we're a bank, and I'm like, I'm not a bank.
We are. Small businesses are a bank.
Mm-hmm.
They know it. And unless you call 30 days, if you're net 30 or net 10 or net 15, whatever the term, whatever it is, on that 16th day, you need to make a phone call to let them know that you're serious about getting your money. You performed the service. You did it, right? You delivered the goods. You're getting me on my horse.
Do you want to help me out with some AR calls, Ruth? I can send you a spreadsheet with phone numbers.
The best AR person I have ever found was phenomenal about getting money. And I said to her, "Why are you so good at this?" And she goes, "I have 3 male teenagers driving me crazy. I'm going through a divorce. Something else was going on in her life." She goes, "Nobody can give me a story that I'm either not living or have gone through. Give me our money." And it was hysterical. But I mean, that's what she did. Her life was a mess, and this was something that she could do that nobody could give her a story that she hadn't been through. And that's why she was really good at it.
Our issue is we can't track down the right person to give us the right information. So it's like, and when you're dealing with third-party processing agents, they're like, hey, I'll pay you, but the buyer has to do their part, and they haven't done their part, but you rendered a service for them, and good luck getting hold of that buyer. And the buyer's like, I'll get it to you Wednesday because I'm super busy. And oh, by the way, here's 10 more orders. And we're like, okay.
Yeah, well, it's like, okay, I'll be happy to do the orders, but I need to get paid first. That's a whole other subject.
We won't take you through the rest of your day to deal with that.
Yeah.
This is fact.
So
That is my next to do.
Well, go do it. Get it done.
We're gonna
Be productive about it too, please.
I will do my best. I'll put on my treadmill. Does that count? I put myself in a rat wheel.
You can make your phone calls on your treadmill. That's fine.
That's it. Well, Ruth, thank you so much for joining and being a part of this.
My pleasure.
Well, everyone, that is a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Build. We took away some real valuable lessons and insights, and I hope that you did as well.
if you enjoyed this episode, we would ask that you subscribe so you can never miss an update. If you're a thought leader looking to innovate in the construction industry, let's talk. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts.
You can find Beyond the Build on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, plus anywhere else that you listen. And if you'd like to learn more about how Faro is changing logistics in the construction industry, please visit our website at faronow.com.
Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, be humble, serve others, and make an impact.